It's now my honor and my privilege to invite up our very accomplished and very distinguished guest, Otis Sanford, who has been working on a project and advising on a project with David Waters on a three-part series on gun violence in our city. A little bit about Otis Sanford before I invite you up to the bema. Otis is a professor emeritus in journalism and strategic media at the University of Memphis. He's the author of the critically acclaimed book, From Boss Crump to King Willie, How Race Changed Memphis Politics, and co-author of In a Colorful Place, Seasoned Opinion About Memphis, about home, about life. Sanford also serves as a political analyst and commentator for ABC 24 News, a columnist for the Daily Memphian, and a political analyst for WKNO. Otis formerly served as managing editor, editorial page editor, and viewpoint columnist for the Commercial Appeal, and he retired in 2023 as a Hardin Chair of Excellence in Journalism at the University of Memphis. He's also a 2014 inductee in the Tennessee Journalism Hall of Fame. And I'll just say that as a longtime reader, anyone who has ever read one of Otis's columns knows that he really, truly does express the conscience of our city. It's my honor to welcome you, Otis Sanford.
Thank you so much, Rabbi, for that wonderful introduction. I really do appreciate that. And thank you to all of you for this invitation to be with you this evening, basically to share my perspectives on this important health, social, and yes, religious issue, the alarming increase in gun violence in our city and in our society. Before I start, I do want to recognize a couple of people who are here who've been on this fight a lot longer, the Moores over here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your fight. Thank you for I know all the things that you've been through, but you've been on this journey, and I just appreciate the both of you so much. So thank you for that. Those of you who are familiar with my journalism work probably already know that I have been a persistent and sometimes harsh critic of our state government's policies. That's an understatement, right? There are policies surrounding the availability and the proliferation of guns. And I will address some of those policies that have been detrimental to our community in just a minute. But first, and especially for my partner in journalism mayhem, who I don't know that she's here this evening, Susan Adler Thorpe, who kind of laughed when she learned that I was going to be here this evening. I want to share with you a little bit more about my background and why I care so much about this important issue. This year marks the 49th year of my professional journalism career, with jobs ranging from a cub reporter at a newspaper in Jackson, Mississippi, to, as you said, Rabbi, managing editor and editorial page editor of the Commercial Appeal. For the first 10 or so years of my career, I spent a great deal of time writing stories about policing and the criminal justice system. Those stories range from spot assignments covering homicides and bank robberies to 7 years covering federal and state courts here in Memphis. I also covered my share of murder trials. Plus, later on, I worked as an editor in charge of police and criminal justice coverage in Detroit at the Detroit Free Press, a city notorious for crime and deadly violence dating back decades. So it's safe to say that I have seen and I've covered it all. And as the book of Ecclesiastes says, there is no new thing under the sun. And yet, I fear there is a new and alarming attitude among our state lawmakers about the availability of guns. In 2018, 7 years after I joined the journalism faculty at the University of Memphis, a former commercial appeal colleague, Louis Graham, and I founded the Institute for Public Service Reporting on the U of M campus. We did so because of the steady decline in investigative, explanatory, and public service journalism among Memphis media outlets, and in particular, the print media. Now, we launched the Institute with two of the best journalists in Memphis, award-winning investigative reporter Mark Pereskia, and, as was mentioned earlier, an award-winning writer, columnist, and editor, David Waters. Even though I retired from the university last year, and they graciously gave me the Professor Emeritus status, I continue to serve as the chair of the advisory board for the Institute and as an editorial consultant, including a consultant on the project that you just talked about. Now approaching its 6th year of operation, the Institute has done phenomenal work with a current staff of 4, and we are growing. That work includes David's exhaustive 3-part series published last August called Tennessee's Gun Valley. The articles documented depressing numbers of children aged 17 and under who were killed by gun violence in Tennessee from 2013 to 2021. That's the last year in which reliable data was available. Davis reporting found that in 2013, at least 29 children in the state were killed by gunfire. 8 years later, in 2021, that number was at least 85 children. In all, more than 650 children ages 17 and under were shot and killed during that 8-year span in Tennessee. In fact, Tennessee's rate of gun deaths is 36% higher than the national average. And firearms are now the leading cause of death for children 17 and under in Tennessee and across the nation. Davis' series also juxtaposed the steady increase in gun deaths among children with the steady loosening of gun laws by the Tennessee legislature. In 2012, Republicans cemented themselves as the supermajority in both the State House and the Senate. Since then, the number of guns made, sold, stolen, and seized in Tennessee has increased dramatically. And registered gun manufacturers in the state have increased from 60 to 83. There were just 6 of them in the entire state in 1998. In addition, since 2013, the number of firearms manufactured in Tennessee has increased from 5,000 to more than 185,000. One other statistic that's worth noting, in 2013, the legislature allowed people to carry and store firearms in their vehicles. The following year, they expanded that law to allow guns in vehicles even on private property that prohibited weapons. Since then, gun thefts from vehicles in Memphis have risen from 287 reported in 2011 to 3,000 last year. That's according to the Memphis Police Department. What's more, more than 40, or what's worse really, more than 40% of guns used in crimes are stolen from vehicles. I could go on and on with the numbers, but David's gut-wrenching reporting goes well beyond the data to the young lives taken and the other lives impacted forever by gun violence. His series included brief stories about 130 children from all across Tennessee who were killed by firearms since 2013. Each one of them was upsetting, but one of them in particular touched a nerve with me immediately after the killing happened. It was the senseless shooting death of 2-year-old Layla Washington. Layla was described by her family as a fun-loving little girl who brought nothing but joy to her entire family. On a Sunday evening in June of 2017, Layla was sound asleep in a baby car seat in her mother, Leslie Washington's vehicle that was parked at a Hickory Hill strip mall. Suddenly, a guy in his late teens who was behind the wheel of another vehicle was driving recklessly in the parking lot very close to Miss Washington's car. She shouted at him not to hit her car. Someone in the car shouted back at her, and Miss Washington simply got in her car and drove away. But these guys would not let it go. They felt disrespected. So they followed Miss Washington on to Kirby Parkway, and seconds later, one of them opened fire on her car. One of the bullets struck little Layla in the head while she was still asleep in her car seat. She died 2 days later at LeBonner Children's Hospital. The grief-stricken family posted photos on social media of the little girl lying mortally wounded in her hospital bed. They posted those pictures, they said, to make a statement to this community of the agony that gun violence brings to innocent citizens. Now, I did not know Layla or her mother, but this despicable shooting affected me in ways that is hard for me to describe now. Maybe it was because I remember when my only daughter was 2 years old and riding in a car seat singing nursery rhymes. She loved Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Or maybe it was because I once lived not far from the shooting scene. But whatever the reason, I could not shake my outrage, particularly since no arrests were made in the killing for nearly a year and a half. I wrote 2 newspaper columns about this incident. I just felt that passionate about this. In one of them, I wrote these words. Once again, we ask ourselves, why is this happening in a supposedly civilized nation? The responses, of course, are predictable. Too many guns on the street, getting into the wrong hands. Too much poverty and despair. A breakdown of the family. A lack of mentoring. And yes, the overall mood of the country. But the fact is, there are no excuses for those responsible for the attack on Layla. They did not shoot her because they were poor and hungry. They didn't indiscriminately fire into a car because they did not make the honor roll in school. or because no one in their family loves them. And they certainly did not act because of political or religious differences. There simply are no legitimate excuses for this level of callous and uncontrolled rage. Far too many of our young people, especially, fail to stop and think about the consequences for themselves and others before pulling the trigger at the first sign of a conflict, unquote. Now, sadly, this is the world in which we live. And the answers to reducing gun violence are as elusive as the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. And as a person of faith, I believe with all my heart that prayer changes things. And I pray constantly for peace. I also believe that our relationship with God gives us discernment, along with the courage to speak out and be the change that we want to see in society. So I continue, and I will continue, to challenge our politicians and policymakers to do what that guy in that car who killed little Layla failed to do. Think first about the consequences of your actions. I will continue to uphold good journalism that's in the public's interest, both through my work and that of the Institute for Public Service Reporting at the U of M, which adheres to the time-honored principle that sometimes you have to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. I will be supportive of any efforts by Temple Israel or any others to help make our city, our state, our nation, and our world better and safer places. This issue is critical for us in this community, across this nation, and across the world. And I applaud you for participating in this national Shabbat to bring gun violence to the forefront. But I encourage you to do as I will continue to do. Hold our policymakers, our politicians, and our elected leaders accountable for the actions that they take that push guns into our community. Yes. I will continue to do that. So, I thank you again for this opportunity to be with you this evening and to share my views. And may God continue to bless and bring you peace and rich blessings for everyone who's here. Thank you so much.